I'll never forget the day my cousin Bridget laughed in my face and told me I'd never amount to anything. She said it in front of the entire family at Thanksgiving and everyone just smiled. Like it was funny, like I deserved it. For 10 years, they made me feel worthless. Every family gathering was another chance to remind me I was the disappointment. But last month, Bridget showed up at my office building, the one with my name on it, with tears in her eyes and her hand out. And you know what? I smiled back. Want to know what I said to her? Let me start from the beginning before we continue. Please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Nadia and I'm 34 years old now. But this story starts when I was 24, broke, and stupid enough to believe that my family actually cared about me. See, my parents died in a car accident when I was 19. One minute I had a normal life, and the next, I was an orphan being raised by my Aunt Lorraine. She's my mom's sister and she took me in without hesitation. I'll always be grateful for that. But gratitude has a way of making you accept things you shouldn't. Aunt Lorraine has 3 daughters. Bridget and Imani are her biological kids, and then there's Claudette, my other cousin from my uncle's side. The 3 of them were always close, and after my parents died, I desperately wanted to be part of that circle. I wanted to belong somewhere again. I wanted family. So when they started treating me like I was less than them, I made excuses. I told myself they were just trying to help, that they wanted what was best for me. God, I was so wrong. It started at Thanksgiving when I was 24. I had just dropped out of business school to start my own venture, a small online vintage clothing resale shop. I know. It sounds stupid now when I say it out loud, but I was passionate about it. I loved finding beautiful, forgotten pieces and giving them new life. I was working as a barista to fund the business, pulling double shifts and staying up until 3 in the morning photographing clothes and writing listings. I was exhausted, but I was happy, or at least, I thought I was. That Thanksgiving, Bridget had just gotten promoted to regional manager at some pharmaceutical company. She was 24, same age as me, and she walked into Aunt Lorraine's house like she owned the world. Claudette had just bought her first house with her husband. She spent the entire afternoon showing us pictures on her phone, talking about mortgage rates and property values like she was some kind of real estate mogul. And then there was me, wearing a sweater I'd thrift for $3, smelling faintly of coffee beans, with my vintage shop that had made maybe $200 that month. We were all sitting around the dinner table when Bridget turned to me with this smile. You know the kind. The one that doesn't reach the eyes. So, Nadia, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, you're selling used clothes on the internet? That's cute. Like a little hobby. I felt my face get hot. It's actually a business. I'm building something. Imani, Bridget's younger sister, jumped in. But when are you going back to finish your degree? You can't do this forever. You need a backup plan. I looked down at my plate. I have a plan. This is my plan. Bridget laughed. Not a mean laugh, exactly. More like the kind of laugh you give a child who says they want to be an astronaut. Okay, but realistically, how long are you going to play dress up with old clothes? I waited for someone to defend me. My aunt, an uncle, anyone. But instead, Aunt Lorraine patted my hand and said, girls, be nice. Nadia's just finding herself. We all mature at different rates. Finding herself. Like I was some confused teenager instead of a grown woman trying to build something from nothing. I smiled and nodded because what else was I supposed to do? Aunt Lorraine had taken me in when I had nowhere else to go. She fed me, housed me, treated me like her own daughter. So I swallowed my hurt and told myself they were right. Maybe I was being immature. Maybe I needed to grow up and get a real job. 2 years later, at Imani's MBA graduation party, it happened again. By then, my business was barely breaking even. I was working 16-hour days, 7 days a week. My hands were constantly dry from handling old fabrics. I had dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. But I was surviving. Just barely. Someone at the party asked me how my business was going. Before I could answer, Bridget cut in. Oh, Nadia's still doing her little eBay thing. How much did you make last year? Like, 20,000. She said it with a laugh, like it was the funniest thing in the world. 35,000, actually, I said quietly. But I'm reinvesting everything back into the business. Claudette, who was pregnant with her second child at the time, gave me this pitying look. Sweetie, that's below the poverty line. You know there's no shame in getting a real job, right? My husband's company is hiring admin assistants. I could put in a word, admin assistant. After I'd spent years building something with my own two hands, she was offering me an entry-level position like it was a favor. And again I made excuses. Maybe they had a point. Claudette had a beautiful home, 2 kids, a stable marriage. Bridget was climbing the corporate ladder. Imani had her MBA. They'd all made it. Who was I to think I knew better? The worst part? I actually considered taking that admin job. I was that beaten down. When I was 28, Bridget got engaged. The engagement party was at this upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices. I showed up wearing a vintage Chanel blazer I'd found at an estate sale. It was real Chanel, probably worth $2,000, but because it was from the 80s, my cousins didn't recognize the brand. Imani took one look at me and said, "Is that from Goodwill? Nadia, we could have lent you something nice." I died a little inside. Then Bridget started in on my love life. I was single at the time because I was working 80 hours a week, but she made it sound like I was some kind of spinster. You know, men want stability. No one's going to take you seriously when you're living in that studio apartment playing dress-up with old clothes. Everyone laughed. Even Aunt Lorraine smiled. After the party, Aunt Lorraine pulled me aside in the parking lot. "Honey, I love you," she said, "but your cousins are worried." "We're all worried. You're almost 30. Don't you want a real career? A family? I feel responsible for you since your parents passed. I just want to see you settled." I cried the entire drive home. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was wasting my life. Maybe I should just give up. But I didn't. I kept going. 2 years passed and something inside me shifted. I stopped trying to prove myself to them. I stopped sharing my victories, my struggles, my life. When Bridget got married in this expensive destination wedding in the Bahamas, I told her I couldn't make it. The truth? I had just landed my first major contract, buying estate sale inventory from a celebrity stylist who was downsizing. It was a $250,000 deal, and I wasn't about to miss it for a weekend of watching Bridget parade around in a $10,000 dress. The family group chat exploded. Photos of the beach, the ceremony, everyone looking perfect and happy. And then the passive-aggressive comments started. "Wish everyone could have made it. Family should always come first. Some people only care about themselves." Bridget sent me a private message 2 days after the wedding. I still remember every word. "You couldn't even prioritize family for one weekend. This is exactly why you're alone. You chose old clothes over your own cousin's wedding. Don't expect me to be there when your little fantasy falls apart." I read that message 3 times, and then I blocked her number. Not permanently, just long enough to stop myself from saying something I'd regret. When I finally saw them again at a family dinner 2 months later, I made the mistake of sharing my excitement about the celebrity stylist contract. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd be happy for me. Claudette barely looked up from her phone. "That's great, but when are you going to think about your future? You're 30, your eggs are dying. Your business is never going to be more than a side hustle." And then Bridget said the words that changed everything. She put down her fork, looked me dead in the eye, and said honestly, "Nadia, we're tired of pretending this is going to work out. You've been building this for 6 years. Just admit you failed and move on." The table went quiet. Everyone stared at their plates. Aunt Lorraine cleared her throat but said nothing. I left early that night. Drove home in silence. Sat in my studio apartment, the one they'd mocked so many times, and had a complete breakdown. I sobbed until my throat hurt and my eyes were swollen shut. But somewhere in that breakdown, something crystallized. A cold, hard truth I'd been avoiding for years. They didn't want me to succeed. They never had. My failure made them feel successful. My struggle made their lives look better by comparison. And I was done making excuses for them. So I made a decision. I would never discuss my business with them again. I stopped going to family reunions. When they asked how I was doing, I gave one-word answers. Fine, busy, good. The family assumed I'd finally given up and was too embarrassed to face them. But really, I was signing the biggest deal of my life. A major online fashion retailer wanted to acquire my business model and hire me as their creative director of vintage authentication. The offer included equity, a 6-figure salary, and a team of 12 people under me. I signed the contract 3 weeks after Bridget told me to admit I'd failed. For the next 3 years, I went completely silent. I moved into a luxury high-rise downtown and told no one. I traveled to Paris, Milan, London for work and never posted about it. I was featured in fashion magazines, consulted for auction houses, authenticated pieces for museums. My name became synonymous with luxury vintage authentication, and my family had no idea. The group chat would occasionally light up with messages. Anyone heard from Nadia? She's probably embarrassed about how things turned out. Maybe she finally got a normal job and doesn't want to tell us. I never responded. I watched from the outside as their lives started to crumble. Bridget got laid off during a pharmaceutical industry merger. Her husband's business failed. They were drowning in debt from that expensive wedding and the lifestyle they couldn't actually afford. Claudette's marriage fell apart. Messy divorce. Her ex-husband got the house. She moved back in with Aunt Lorraine with 2 kids. Imani made a terrible investment in some friend's startup and lost $80,000 of her savings. She was working 2 jobs just to recover. I didn't feel happy about their struggles, but I didn't feel sorry for them either. When Aunt Lorraine turned 65, she insisted I come to her birthday dinner. She called me directly, which she rarely did. "Nadia, I don't care how busy you are. I raised you. You owe me this." She was right. Despite everything, she had taken me in when my parents died, so I agreed. I showed up in a designer outfit, not vintage, brand new, drove up in a leased luxury car, and walked into that house like I owned it. The look on my cousins' faces was priceless. Bridget's mouth literally fell open. "Wow, Nadia, you look different. Did you finally get a corporate job?" I smiled. "Something like that." Dinner was awkward. They kept probing, trying to figure out what I'd been doing. I stayed vague. "I've been busy with work. Travel a lot." When they asked what kind of work, I just said fashion industry. Consulting. I gave Aunt Lorraine her gift, a fully paid cruise vacation for 2. She cried and hugged me for a full minute. Bridget watched with this look on her face. Jealousy mixed with confusion. "That's generous," Bridget said. "Consulting must pay well." It does. After dinner, Bridget must have Googled my name because 3 days later, my phone rang. First time she'd called in months. "Hey, so I saw some articles about you online. You're doing amazing. I'm so proud of you. We should celebrate." I let the silence stretch. "Thanks. So I was actually wondering if maybe you could give me some business advice? Or if you're hiring? Things have been tough since the layoff, and I thought maybe." "I'll think about it," I said and hung up. Over the next 2 weeks, they all reached out. Claudette needed money for lawyer fees. Imani wanted me to invest in her new business idea. Bridget sent a long email apologizing for any misunderstandings and asking for a $30,000 loan. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I started planning something better. The annual family reunion was coming up in 3 weeks, and I was definitely going to attend. The annual family reunion at Aunt Lorraine's house was always the 2nd Saturday in October. This year, I marked it on my calendar with a red pen. I wasn't dreading it. For the first time in 10 years, I was actually looking forward to seeing my cousins. I arrived exactly on time. Not early, not late. I stepped out of my car wearing a simple but expensive outfit, carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than what I used to make in a week as a barista. The moment I walked through that door, Bridget practically sprinted across the room. "Nadia, oh my God, we've missed you so much." She hugged me like we were best friends who hadn't seen each other in years. Claudette was right behind her. "You look incredible. Seriously, tell us everything. What have you been up to?" They stuck to me like glue, complimenting my hair, my clothes, asking about my work. Other family members who'd heard about my success treated me like some kind of celebrity. Uncle Raymond wanted business advice. Aunt Lorraine kept introducing me to people as my brilliant niece who works in fashion. It was nauseating, honestly, but I played along, smiled, answered questions vaguely, watched them try so desperately hard to get me alone. Finally, Bridget cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling my wine glass. She glanced over her shoulder to make sure no one was listening, then leaned in close. "So, did you get my email? About the loan?" I took a sip of wine. "I did. And..." Her voice had this desperate edge to it. "I mean, we're family. I'd do the same for you." I looked at her for a long moment. "Would you?" She laughed nervously. "Of course. That's what family does. And I know I maybe wasn't the most supportive before, but I always believed in you deep down. You know that, right?" Before I could respond, Claudette and Imani walked in. Perfect timing. "We were just talking about how we always knew you'd make it," Claudette said, smiling so wide it looked painful. Imani nodded enthusiastically. Remember how we used to encourage you? We were always in your corner. I set down my wine glass and pulled out my phone. That's interesting, because I have something to show you. For the past 3 years, I'd been keeping receipts, screenshots of every cruel message in the family group chat, voice recordings from that Thanksgiving when Bridget said I'd never amount to anything. I'd recorded it on my phone because even back then, some part of me knew I'd need proof that I wasn't crazy, that their cruelty was real. I played it all back. Every insult, every belittling comment, every moment they'd made me feel worthless. The color drained from their faces. Bridget's hand started shaking. Claudette looked like she might throw up. Imani just stared at the floor. You didn't believe in me, I said quietly. You enjoyed watching me struggle. Every family gathering was a chance for you to feel superior. Every time I tried to share something I was proud of, you crushed it. Bridget's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair. We were just worried about you. Worried. My voice was steady, but I felt fire in my chest. When I was working 16-hour days, terrified I'd lose everything, where were you? Laughing at me. When I skipped meals to afford inventory, you were judging my clothes from Goodwill. And now that I've made it without any of your help, you want to pretend we're close. Claudette reached for my arm. We're family. I stepped back. Family supports each other. You treated me like I was your entertainment, like watching me fail was the highlight of your year. Please, Bridget whispered. I'm desperate. I need help. I was desperate too, I said. You told me to get a real job, so I'm giving you the same advice you gave me. Figure it out. I walked toward the door, then stopped, turned back around. Actually, I lied. I am going to help you, just not the way you want. I pulled 3 envelopes from my purse and handed one to each of them. They opened them with shaking hands. Inside were information packets, community college programs, job placement services, financial counseling resources, free career workshops. These are the same resources I used when I had nothing, I said. When you all had everything and watched me drown, maybe they'll work for you too. Bridget crumpled her envelope. This is cruel. No, I said. Cruel is telling someone they'll never succeed. Cruel is mocking someone's dreams at every opportunity. Cruel is kicking someone when they're already down. What I'm doing? This is called boundaries. Aunt Lorraine appeared in the doorway. She'd heard everything. Nadia, please don't leave like this. I looked at the woman who'd raised me after my parents died. The woman I'd been so grateful to that I'd let her daughters torture me for years. I love you, I said. You gave me a home when I had none, and I'll never forget that. But you also let them treat me like garbage. You told me I was the problem. You made me feel like I was crazy for wanting more. Her face crumpled. I was trying to protect you from disappointment. You were trying to keep me small, I said, because small was easier for everyone else to deal with. But I'm not small anymore, and I'm done pretending this is healthy. I walked out of that house and got into my car. My phone buzzed immediately. A call from my business partner. Another major client wanted to hire us for a $5 million authentication project for a museum collection. I answered the phone, negotiated the terms, and drove away from that house knowing I'd never go back. 6 months have passed since that reunion. I haven't spoken to my cousins. Bridget still sends occasional apologetic texts that I leave on read. Claudette found a job and seems to be rebuilding her life. Good for her, honestly. Imani wrote me a genuine apology letter. It was thoughtful and seemed sincere. I appreciated it, but I still keep my distance. I maintain a polite relationship with Aunt Lorraine. We have lunch once a month. But there are boundaries now. Hard ones. My business is thriving. I'm surrounded by people who believed in me from the beginning. People who celebrated my wins instead of diminishing them. And I've never been happier. Sometimes the family reunion photos pop up on my social media. I'm not in them anymore. And I don't miss it even a little bit. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story or opinions in the comments.